So did you have time to think? I hope so, because this is a serious question. This is an important question, I think. When is it justified for a citizen to act as his own legislator and decide whether or not he will obey a given law? Okay. Now, I'm sure there are many answers, to this question, but I believe that we citizens should be able to differentiate between good and evil. Now, if a law, this is kind of what I'm thinking, all right? If a law protects society from crime and criminals, then I think the law should be complied with. I think that'd be very easy to justify complying with a law if it protects society from criminals and crime. If you're going to break the law for a right cause, even with hard consequences, then breaking the law can be justified. Now, Darlene, what are you saying? Okay, I'm glad you asked. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. So Rosa Parks broke the law. This was during a time in America when there was segregation. Blacks and whites had different rules just because of the color of their skin, which was a very sad time, a very low time in America. But Rosa Parks did not give up her seat on the bus for a white person. That was the rule of the day. And what would you have done? You're a black woman, and the law was that on the bus you would have to give up your seat for a white person, man or woman, didn't matter, but you had to give up your seat. She had a defining moment, and she knew she would face jail. She knew that what it would do with her family, but she was going to break that law. Now, I don't know if she knew what it would start and the attention and the media and the whole movement that it would start from that, but she was like, I am not going to do it. It only takes one person to start something, right? But she was probably considered a criminal. I don't know if they actually dubbed her a criminal, but when you break the law, that's usually what they dub you as, is you're a criminal. I think of someone else, Corrie ten Boom. She was, now some of you may not know who she is, but it's her family, the ten Boom family, is a missionary family, but they were in Germany, and they were hiding Jewish families when they were escaping the Nazi Germany or Nazi regime, and they were hiding the families. So they were definitely defying the government, by hiding Jewish families. That was wrong. But these families were escaping, and they would hide them and help them to freedom. And that was definitely defying, and knowing that, if they were caught, they would, be going to jail themselves or going to concentration camps. And so they defied their government. So again, what would you do? That is breaking the law for a right cause. That is, those laws that were in place for those two examples, those are controlling laws. And these were things that were in my comments about people were saying that we needed to, that they were saying, well, we need to obey the law. We Christians need to obey the government. We need to basically, we need to obey the law. Now, some people have said that we need to obey the law until it goes against God. But in any one of those examples, do any one of those go against God? Well, giving up your seat on the bus, does that go against God? Well, I can't really say that would be a God thing, but that law in that day, when the day that Rosa Parks was living in, that the law of the day was going against her personhood. It was demeaning, and that was not right. It was treating people differently just based on the color of their skin. So I would have to say that would go against God. So I would justify that. Okay, and then Corrie, the ten Boom family, the same thing with the Jewish people. They were being discriminated against just because they were Jewish, because of their faith, and that would go against God as well, because we are all God's children. Life is precious. And so that's the higher moral law that I would be breaking the law. I would be going against the government and knowing that my life would be at risk as well. All right. But I have other Christians telling me to sit down and shut up, just obey. So with regards to the church that I posted about, and what we're facing right now with sheltering in place and being in the same kind of control that, government control right now. They're controlling a lot of things, all in the name of a pandemic. And so, we Americans are not built to shelter in place. And then I will add that Christians are not meant to shelter in place. Although over the years, I have seen that many Christians seem to be very happy staying sheltered and comfortable. They have a don't rock the boat attitude. And what we have going on right now in many states, is an excuse for more of it's a pandemic excuse for the powers that be to have control of people. They're controlling what they buy, where we buy it, when we buy it, when we can move, when we can travel, how we can interact with people, what kind of fun we can have, whether or not you can conduct business. We're picking and choosing which businesses are essential, who can open when, whether or not the church can assemble. It's not right. It's overreaching. And you know what? I don't know if people, Christians, whatever, if people just don't realize what's going on here, the control, or if they're just comfortable with the control. I read an article today by Joshua Teis, T-E-I-S. I am not sure how to say his name. So if you are listening, I'm so sorry if I butchered your name, but he's reminding us in his article of this. He says, quote, "Just as a human being can temporarily survive without food, so can the church temporarily survive without assembling together in physical form. But John 1:14 says that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us." That's Jesus. "And we beheld his glory." Jesus became flesh and dwelt among us. And it says that we beheld his glory. Now, just as the incarnation of the Son of God allowed us to physically be with Jesus Christ, talk with Jesus Christ, and look into the eyes of Jesus Christ, we must be physically ministering to our congregations, physically assembling together. His article was called Church, Some Assembly Required. I think that's what it was called. And I will put a link to that in the description box. It was a very good read, very good reminder to Christians is that, you can take away the buildings, you can take away, the internet, you can take away a lot of these things, but regardless, no matter what, the church will assemble. He has a question in his blog. He says, "At what point does the church respectfully disregard government mandate and start assembling once more?" Good question, Joshua. Good question. Now we've got something. I'm not sure if he's a pastor. I think he's a pastor. He was speaking as a pastor in his article. So, but I think this is a very good question because now we're getting to the point of where I think pastors are starting to get it, where they're like, I don't think we need to be sitting down and shutting up anymore. And this is what I'm saying. I don't think we need to be sitting down and shutting up anymore. I think the simple answer to your question, Joshua, I don't know if I was going to say Josh, but I don't want to be disrespectful. But I think the simple answer would be whatever your conscience tells you. Okay? If I understand my Baptist history correctly, Baptists and other free churches are they're not state-supported churches like Roman Catholic, okay? But free churches cherish their soul freedom, S-O-U-L, soul freedom, to follow their consciences, not government mandates, okay? And that's what I understand about my Baptist freedom and more religious freedom, really. So as a pastor, okay, so opening up your church and doing so with respect to what's going on in your community is between you and God. And then allowing believers to use their own conscience, guided by God, to decide whether or not they will attend service in person. We just leave it up to the believers, right? And so I know for my church, I think it was like the one Sunday before our governor actually said, whoop, we're going to ban. Oh, no, it's before Governor Northam took everything down to 10. When I think the first size limit was 50. Our pastor, had said, we have service on this Sunday, but he was requesting that the people that were in the high risk category, he says, I would ask that you would stay home. And then those that were in families that had children, because, children are, little germ catchers and spreaders and stuff, so they would be all over each other. I have 3 children. So, but anyway, so we had services, but it was, limited size of the congregation. So I would think that allowing it to be up to people that, would stay home if they did not feel comfortable coming out, or if your church couldn't accommodate, enough people to stay the 6-foot distance apart. But again, what works for your church may not work for my church. And I think that would be, that's between you and God and you and your congregation, and you work that out. And then, and it's different for the next church and stuff. And I think that's where our religious freedom comes in, is we have everything is up to the individual. It's up to the individual church, and that's where the flexibility needs to come in. I have a question. What I would like to know is how long is the church going to stay silent? How long are the people going to stay silent? How long will people and Christians stay silent and sitting down and quiet? Because every time, the longer we do this, the longer our government is going to encroach on our liberties. Okay, we're just going to allow them to do it. How long are individuals going to cooperate? I'm seeing protests. I'm seeing people suing their governors or suing the state. I don't know how that works. I'm seeing things that are happening across the country. Individuals are starting to wake up, and they're starting to be like, I'm tired of you telling us what we can do. I've got friends that own businesses that are like, you know what? We're looking at May and we're freaking out. And we've applied for all of the small business loans, and it's just not going to help. And, we cannot stop doing business. We cannot stop doing stuff. And so we're going to have a revolt here pretty soon. I would like to know, I would actually, since we're talking about, pastors and churches, I would like to see pastors forming some kind of a group, coalition, something, whatever, I don't know. But pastors getting together, approaching our governor, calling him, and our governor reaching out to pastors and having some kind of a call with the pastors in the state of Virginia to talk about more flexibility. How can, what can we do? How can the pastors assure Governor Northam that, look, we're going to have these meetings and we will do these things, we will take all of these precautions, we will either install these things or we will have, these precautions in place. I've known churches that installed hospital grade air circulation systems, and then to say, we'll do, 2 or 3 services on Sunday just to accommodate our people, or we'll just do 1 service, or we won't have nursery here, or we'll do these things, or we'll do these cleaning procedures. Or the governor can say, well, how about this many people per square foot? Because the grocery stores are doing that. It's, how these, they're going shopping and saying you can have so many people per square feet. Okay, well, if you're going to allow it for grocery stores and other stores, then we should allow it for churches as well. But churches are being targeted and almost suppressed. And we have people tattling and saying, calling the sheriffs and saying, they're having church, go get them. They can't be doing that. And they're not even doing anything wrong. They're meeting in their cars. And it's just, it's mind-boggling what's happening. What this is reminding me of, and I pulled up this letter from Martin Luther King. And I'll put a link to it, but I want you all to go look up Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail in 1963. I was so amazed when I read this letter because it is so appropriate for today, for what we're going through. Now, and please, don't misunderstand me. Don't misunderstand my heart and what I'm trying to do here. I know that this was written during a time when it was segregation, and I know his heart and where he's coming from. And he's talking about, this is a time where he's writing about the Black community, and he does use the word Negro, and I do not mean at all when I read this letter, I do not mean any disrespect at all to him or to the community or by using this word, okay? However, when I see the word segregation and this, and segregation, I see government control, because that's why we had segregation at that time. It was rules by the government. Okay, and so I say that government control. But I just thought it was kind of interesting, and that he was writing from jail just like Paul was. He was writing to his fellow pastors just like Paul was writing to the churches. And he says that he evidently came across something. He came across a statement from them calling his present activities unwise and untimely, which is what I was getting in my comments on my Facebook post. And they were talking about the pastor of that church in Chincoteague, Virginia, about his actions being unwise. He knew what he was doing. He shouldn't have done that, and he should be penalized. And so that's what they were doing here with Martin Luther King Jr. He should be penalized. He knew what he was doing. He was having a march. He was demonstrating. He says that he was here in Birmingham because injustice was there, And I'm calling injustice what is going on right now around the country, the stay-at-home orders and the control of everything, Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Now, I understand that we have our stay-at-home orders. Why the governors were doing it, I understand. And I think everybody understands that. But when it's really starting to, when we have rogue governors that are using a pandemic as an escape clause in the Constitution for liberty, that's wrong. And I'm going to digress here, but we have conflicting numbers, we have conflicting reports, and we can't get anything straight out of anybody. And our government our president just took money and is withholding funds that go to the World Health Organization because of a whole bunch of hooey going on there with ties to China, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with China about their deceptions and with this whole coronavirus thing. So let's just, think about that, and we're just going to put that on the table right there. But getting back to this, so he's talking about direct action, and that's what I think that this pastor in Chincoteague did. It was direct action what he did. He just was, whether or not he had the purpose of like what Martin Luther King did, but this pastor was like, it was direct action. I'm holding a service because I have a right to, I'm exercising my rights. And this is what Martin Luther King is doing here, because he says, we have constitutional and God-given rights. And may I remind you, we have soul liberty. All right, S-O-U-L, soul liberty. So he says, why direct action? He says, isn't negotiation a better path, you might ask? And when I hear negotiation, I think of, like the obedience and submission that I've been hearing everybody say, we should submit, that's the better thing to do. We just need to obey the government. Well, he says you're exactly right in your call for negotiation. Indeed, this is the purpose of direct action. Nonviolent, direct action seeks to create such a crisis and establish such creative tension that a community that has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. And that's what direct action does. It's like, like I said, sometimes you have to do that in order to get the attention of the leaders. He says, again, we know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. All right, so how long are we going to stay oppressed, people? We have freedoms. We need to wake up and realize that we have them. Christians, we have them. We have it. And it's not wrong to demand it. We have to, because it's certainly not going to come from our governor or our government in D.C. He says, he's talking to his fellow clergymen, which I'm hearing from my fellow Christians in my comments. He says, you express a great deal of anxiety over our willingness to break laws. This is certainly a legitimate concern, since we so diligently urge people to obey. Romans 13, I hear a lot. He says, at first glance, it may seem rather paradoxical for us to consciously break laws. One may ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? Someone actually asked me that in my comments too. Well, he says, the answer lies in the fact that there are two types of laws, just and unjust. And he says, I would advocate obeying just laws. One has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. One has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. And he also says, I would agree with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all. And he talks about segregation right here. And he says, segregation, to use the terminology of the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber, substitutes an I-it relationship for an I-thou relationship and ends up relegating persons to the status of things. This is key. And I know he was talking about segregation, but this is key because this is government. This is how the government views us. All of us. And the government views us this way. There is no I-thou relationship here with the government. And it certainly has turned around because the government, our governor, our people that are in our General Assembly in Virginia, in the Commonwealth, and even in D.C., they are our representatives and they work for us to represent us. We are not their slaves. We don't do their bidding. In fact, if there's any bidding to be done, they're supposed to do ours, if it's like that at all. Okay, but we need to remember that there should be this relationship. They should know their constituents. That should be, we are not things. We are not assets to them. We are not just things to control. And that is lost upon them. And so there is a, what was segregation then with black and white people is now just a government citizen. And it's not this, there's no I-thou relationship at all. And this is huge. We need to remember this. And of course, that was a Jewish philosopher, so he would know. He's saying that one who breaks an unjust law must do so openly, lovingly, and with a willingness to accept the penalty. Okay, and I think that church, the pastor of that church in Chincoteague, did just that. It's not like he was hiding. He didn't do it, with a harsh tone, with any arrogance or anything. He was just doing what he needed to do. He did it out of love, and he was just, doing it because this is the people that he serves. Martin Luther King says, an individual who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and who willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice is in reality expressing the highest respect for law. I stand behind this person, the person that does that. So he references, and again in his letter, he references civil disobedience being nothing new. He references Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego disobeying the laws of Nebuchadnezzar. He references academic freedom. That's a reality because Socrates practiced civil disobedience. And he references the Boston Tea Party, that being a massive act of civil disobedience. There were some things that we needed to do in order to get the attention. And sometimes these are things that we need to do. So sitting down and always throwing these things out of, we need to obey, and we need to obey unless obey the government unless it goes against God. Well, when does it actually go against God? I know about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That definitely went against God because that was, the higher, they weren't going to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar. They were going to, they vowed to bow down to God. But when it comes to the Boston Tea Party, how does that relate to God? Okay, because there's a right, there's a just law and an unjust law. We need to keep that in check, and we have these. It's a right to personhood and our liberty, and in Jesus Christ we have liberty, so that we don't have to be under tyrannical and controlling government. Okay, when it's affecting our personhood, our somebodyness, as Martin Luther King says. All right. There's something else he says in here that is really, really, really important. And remember, he's writing to pastors. He says, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. I was hearing all of this in my comments when I was going back and forth with everyone. Everyone was talking about being more, being devoted to order. That's all I was hearing. We need to obey. We need to obey. How come you're not obeying? How can you justify people to be breaking the law? Well, we've just given a whole bunch of examples of what to break the law and creating that civil disobedience. Challenging our governor is respectful, or respectfully challenging our governor. And I agree with him. I have a problem with the white moderate too, because I see that our churches around America are full of them. They're full of the white moderate person who is devoted to order. I'm devoted to comfort and to peace. Don't rock that boat. And I'm, when it comes to justice, don't, you just need to be quiet there. We can't be getting all, getting all crazy, that direct action stuff. No. You just need to wait. Just wait. I was hearing that too in my comments. Just wait until the governor reopens the state. When's that going to be? How long are we going to wait? Because he just extended it today. He just extended the reopening of businesses another 2 weeks. But we have another order that takes us to June, and then I actually heard rumors that he was extending something till August. I'm just like, no, we need to be pushing back and telling him, no, we need to reopen. We need to get back to living. This letter is full of good stuff, and I think all of you should go look this up. Click that link, go download the letter. I think everybody needs to be reading this for history anyway. This is speaking to the heart, because what was going on in 1963 you could just replace a whole bunch of words, and it's very pertinent and applicable to today. It's being a holy rebel, if I could say that. It's God's rules, though. You're being a holy rebel according to God's rules, but that requires discernment and love. Again, we're not doing this out of, arrogance or ego or anything out of, pride. No, it's discernment and love, but I'll tell you, you're not going to get a lot of love from the world, and you're not going to get a lot of love from your fellow Christians, it seems. Because there's a lot of them that like to be calm and comfortable and sheltered and that kind of thing. We're all talking about, standing up. We're all like Peter, one of Jesus's disciples. We're all like Peter. We're going to talk that talk, I'm going to stand by you, Jesus, if I have to die with you, and I'm going to be right there. But when it came time, does your walk match your talk?